also had that topic of how to elevate analytics to the executive level. And I think one of the first things that was very insightful was, what is an executive? And we tore the word apart, and an executive executes decisions. And so it's all about decision making and how, who are the decision makers in a company, and how can we help them make better decisions and encourage them to use analysis to make those decisions. The group had several from the travel, media, and publishing industry. I would say the travel industry was most highly represented, both in people and in a number of things said. But some of the people had a big team. In other words, many people working for them, and others were more the doers, the ones that actually made the analytics. And it was interesting to see that in some cases they weren't quite sure what the analysis was being used for. And I think to some degree that was probably part of the problem, although they were there to learn how to do that better. We also had someone from Omniture, and that was good experience from the field. And then Jim showed up, which was also good. $20
later.
20 bucks. So, the goal was, how do you get execs? What do they want? How can we get them to use it better? How can we get the executives more engaged? That was the scope of what we're trying to do. So for this presentation, what we did is put together a number of action items and key takeaways. We started with the key takeaways, and we said, okay, what are the actions that we should do to impact that takeaway? And the first one we came up with was that analysts have responsibilities too. It's not just the executive that's going to make these decisions. The analyst has to help the executive understand what they're trying to measure, and indeed understand what the executive is trying to do. And so often the analyst just produces the reports without really understanding, and that has to stop. Another issue that came up was that a lot of analysts are producing reports that don't necessarily do anything. The whole story of somebody's been producing this report for 5 years, and one person is using them. And so push back on requests. We came up with the idea, we didn't develop it very, very deeply, but can you create a currency somehow where you give an executive a bunch of coins and say, okay, you can buy these analytic reports. The problem here is that sometimes they ask what they think is a simple question, and it may not have a lot of value to them, but it's very difficult to create the answer for. And so you need to somehow be able to push that back. Part of that is to get a feedback on the value. And we felt this was difficult sometimes to ask an executive, well, was that a good answer, or what are you doing with this information? But that was something that you really do want to do. Excuse me. And stop the stupid stuff if you can. Sort of a joke, but just stop producing reports for a couple of days and see who screams. And sometimes that can help you prioritize things. Also, another idea I thought was pretty good is give them an above and a below the line type of rating. So, well, here's what I'm doing for you. Now, what is this new request, above the line or below the line? And then again, try to put some sort of difficulty degree on that. So over time, the executive knows what they can ask and what they probably should think twice about asking. I thought another really good idea that came up was give them a tease answer. So sometimes it's easy to come up with a ballpark, get them sort of on the right road, but then also give them the details of the caveats of well, I can't tell you this because we don't have this information or that information. And this starts helping them understand the need for the commitment on their part to really put the resources into making it right. Another one, and Jim also appreciated this, was that encourage something like a management consultant to come in for bootstrapping your management if that's needed. There are two types of consultants. One comes in and helps you make the product work, and another one is more of a workshop where you try to get management to understand the value of decision-making process. And sometimes it's that external person coming in that can make that work best. So our second key takeaway was that for executives, analysts are the tool. They don't want to report. They really can't do much with it. And so you as an analyst really have to be the one to simplify and make the analysis relevant. And a lot of times the web data alone is not enough. In other words, everything you can possibly do with Site Catalyst may not be enough for your executives. You may have to pull in data from other channels. You may have to pull data from your data warehouse. You may have to use some BI tools to pull different things together to really make it relevant. So don't just think about, well, here's the question, oh, Site Catalyst is the answer. Really try to come up with what the answer should be. You also have to do a lot of work first. Have your backup data, anticipate questions, know where your data is weak, and really have that story. You're going in with a sort of a narrative of the thing you're trying to present to the executive. Quantify the data. What does it mean? What are the decisions that this data is begging to have made? Another idea came from the group was to take lessons from finance. They spend a lot of time analyzing things. They present 10 pages, but there's 100 pages of backup that they hope nobody really looks at, but know that someday some analyst is going to sit in there and look through that data. Third key takeaway is get executive buy-in early so that you have alignment when you need it. And treat executives like venture capitalists. You're looking for that early capital from them. And the capital might be in terms of resources, or it might be in terms of a bonus at the end of the quarter. But you want to put a stake in the ground and say, if we use web analytics, we can gain you 5% conversion rate in a quarter. So some stake in the ground that at least you're getting their attention, you're putting some of your own effort into that or your own reputation into that, and that helps you get their trust. Now, conversely, and this ended up being one of those topics that we really need to dig further into, was if you put your stake in the ground, then you're not as objective. And so one of the persons in the audience, and I think I've seen this before, they work for more of an R&D or a auxiliary group that reports, that is sort of a support group for the marketing organization. And so if you have to really watch out that you remain objective and you're not trying to cook the numbers, like we all know the marketing people do. So, in this case, you're trying to earn trust slowly. Give the executives case studies from internal use, sort of use that meme marketing where you're trying to get those internal stories out and let your reputation spread. Try to be the standard that others have to explain themselves against. And this gets into the data quality issue. Executives will stop listening when the quality goes bad. And so you really have to have the quality. So when somebody comes in and says, well, how come the Nielsen numbers aren't the same as ours? You want to have it so that the Nielsen has to prove themselves, not you. And that happens by slow building of trust. Also, let's face it, numbers are never going to be completely accurate, but they're so much more accurate than a lot of the other marketing numbers out there, and so they have to be educated that it's more powerful and, in many cases, faster returns than some of the tools that they're already using. Another insight was that the better the analysis, the more senior exec will use it. So you can't just go for your CEO. You're really going to have to start at the lower levels and work your way up. And so if you build a team approach where you have a number of analysts and you're really sending the better analysts to the higher executives, and people will learn as they go up. One person in the room said that as an analyst, they kept finding that they'd work with an executive and then they'd find out working with that person's boss and that person's boss. So the better you are, the more up the stack you'll go. We had another discussion. This is one of those, we had two opinions, but do you initially work with those that are willing to work with you? In other words, don't suffer the fools. Or do you, in fact, suffer the fools because they're the ones that really need the analysis the most? And I think we came sort of to a compromise in that you've got to start with the people that will work with you because that helps you build your reputation. And then after you've got the reputation, then you've got to go do the hard work and work with the ones that really need to get it. Also taking the Google approach of spending 5% or up to 20% of your time on discovery, because occasionally you'll come up with that wow. And those wows will blow the executives away, and that will help you gain credibility. And finally, if you solve, this is another key takeaway, if you solve process and organizational problems, the technical issues are going to remain. We often talk about process and organization as really being the problems. And those that are at the point where process and organization are pretty much under control,